Hi everyone, welcome back to my drama school audition series. If you haven't started thinking about self-tapes, now is your chance. For some people, the word self-tape is an utter nightmare. Just remember that you have so much control over the outcome. There are points where the process might seem a bit difficult, but you've got to remind yourself how amazing it will feel once it's sent off and know that you can get through it. The whole point of the self-tape process is to show that you can be disciplined and resilient without the guidance of a tutor. This is why it's so important to read the requirements and take your time. The amount of times I will be scrolling through YouTube and someone's public self-tape will pop up and I think, do you know what, I'm just gonna have a nosy, and it's done wrong.
Hurts me internally.
One of the main things that I see a lot is people filming in portrait. And this is the dance section of my self-tape. You will never be asked to film a self-tape in portrait. Please stick to landscape. Treat your self-tape like an actual audition, and by that I mean prepare yourself properly. Depending on what section you're doing, make sure you're vocally warmed up, physically warmed up, mentally in the zone, and also make sure you have everything in the room with you so that you don't have to keep running backwards and forwards. One of the things that helped me the most was making a plan of when I was going to record and not leaving it last minute. The likelihood is you're not going to record it all in one day, so give yourself a chance to actually learn all the material first. It took me 2 days to record my dance section because the first day I did it, I just don't think I danced my best. I've heard various opinions on this, but I personally believe that you should be picky. By that, I don't mean pull apart every little thing that you do. I just mean if you watch it back and you're not happy with it, don't send it off, just re-record it. If you're unsure, just think, could I do this better and am I showing off my ability? When you get a successful take, record another one. Don't do it so much that you stress yourself out, but just give yourself options. This is why time is so important. Do not rush. Let's start off by talking about the dance because I feel like it's probably the hardest to execute. You're going to need a fairly large space. There's really no point in restricting yourself to one small room because you're not going to be able to fully travel, which means that you won't have energy and the movements might not look as good as they normally do. I recommend using the facilities at your dance school or college, and if nothing's available, there are places you'll be able to hire. This sounds silly, but make sure your camera is at an angle that doesn't change the way you look. This is particularly important if you're doing a ballet self-tape because they want to see your alignment. If you can, I would also recommend investing in a tripod because A, it just keeps it stable, and B, it makes it easier to actually set up your angles. You can also get someone trusted to record it for you if you're struggling. Also, a bright and clear environment is really important, so make sure that you're not placing the camera somewhere where you're in silhouette. The panel are going to watch hundreds of self-tape auditions every day. The last thing you want is to be not seen properly and they disregard it straight away. I always say to do a test video just in case you're moving out of frame or the sound is distorted. You'll find something that works for you, but for me when recording, I preferred to do the exercises one at a time, and that way if I was struggling I could come back to them later. This also allowed me to put my full focus on each section. Also, it's really important to remember that you are allowed to take breaks. You're in control of your time. If something isn't working, just breathe, take a quick break and come back to it later. When you're not in the right frame of mind, it's going to be very difficult to get a good outcome. For singing and acting, you're pretty much only showing from your torso upwards, so you won't need that much space. But it is important to remember that you're going to need a plain background so that the panel don't get distracted. I just used a plain white wall, but I now have access to a collapsible blue screen, so if you have one of those, that's great. There's no need to overthink your background though. When acting, make sure you exaggerate everything. That's kind of an obvious point, but in camera works. Sometimes it can't pick up like subtle changes in emotion, so it's really important to make it obvious. Even though you're performing to a camera, still treat it like there's a panel in front of you. And by that, I don't mean just stare at the camera. The camera is part of the audience. Use the space and your eye line to present them a story. To make the story more engaging, place someone else in your scene, and if you don't have another character, then just have a focal point. The only exception to not staring at the camera is when you're introducing yourself. Schools will normally have different requirements for the introduction, but usually they'd ask for your name, your UCAS number, and the course you're applying for. My first section was a spoken introduction, but to make life easier, I just then held it up to the camera on a board. For one of the schools I auditioned for, a couple of the exercises were quite long, so I wrote down the order of the movements on a piece of paper and put it at the side. They don't technically say you can't do this, but just don't make it obvious that you're looking. That's all for today's video. Please do pop any questions you have below, and I will try to answer them as best as I can. Happy self-taping, everyone!